Hello and welcome to this conversation on preventing veteran suicide. Across the United States, 20 veterans die by suicide each day. That includes an average of 5 per week here in North Carolina. To look into the issue today, we have invited prevention specialists, counselors, and of course veterans with first-hand experience with the crisis. We hope you'll learn the signs, how to help, and how to reduce the number of suicides amongst our military and veteran community. This is our special report, A Reason to Live. Joining us first, Dr. Nicole French. I appreciate you being here, first of all, and having this discussion about suicide prevention for veterans. You are with the Army Reserves first. That's why you're in uniform today. Talk about what you do with them first.
Sure. I'm a psychology consultant with Army Medical Command. So my job is really to support behavioral health officers who are getting ready to deploy and supporting troops downrange.
Now, some people get intimidated by having to go talk to the psychologist sometimes. How do you break down that barrier so that we do get services to those that need it? Or is there a way to break down that barrier, really?
You know, I think really it's important to train battle buddies. I mean, suicide prevention is everybody's business. I think we all have to go in for our periodic health kind of questionnaire, and I think that's just a great opportunity to invite people to pay attention to their whole health, which includes mind health. It can be scary, but you know, I think there are a variety of ways that command and staff and can break down barriers to really talking about health and well-being from a holistic perspective.
For those soldiers I know that are still in service, they say that it is easier now to come talk to someone like you. So that's good. You are doing a good job with that. What is it you're seeing on the suicide side for active duty and reservists? How big of an issue is that you see that's happening right now?
You know, I think it's a huge issue. I know transition stress has been talked about quite a bit. You know, we spend a lot of time focused on post-traumatic stress disorder, but, you know, 46 to 72% of transitioning service members and veterans report transition stress, and suicidal ideation is associated with transition stress. So I think just paying attention to stress and how it shows up. So I have certainly worked with numerous transitioning service members, and you know, it is a big issue and it's everybody's issue. So how do we pay attention as a command, really, and to the signs, symptoms, and really notice disconnection, I guess, because in transition, folks are looking for a new mission, they're looking for a community, and often they're looking for resources. So the folks that, you know, I have come across, there's been either a loss of belonging of some sort, a lost relationship, a loss of kind of identity or mission, or they're just in some sort of crisis that's temporary, but it overwhelms their resources in that moment.
Speaking of resources, the other hat you get to wear, you work with the Veterans Bridge Home in Charlotte.
Yes.
Talk about how both roles kind of come together at times.
Sure. So I'm the clinical director at Veterans Bridge Home, and support actually NC Serves Metrolina service providers. So we've got over 70 organizations in the Metrolina that serves over 10 counties. And really supports veterans, service members, and their families find employment, education resources, healthcare, financial assistance, really just a veteran community of those who either have served or just have great appreciation for those who have served. So it is really an honor to be a part of a community that wants to welcome transitioning veterans and their families and service members and their families, help them really integrate into the fabric of our community.
With that role as well, Charlotte and Mecklenburg County is part of the Mayor's Challenge on Veteran Suicide Prevention. You're a big part of that as well as a co-lead, I believe.
Yes.
So talk about real quickly about that and how the community can be involved.
Sure, we are so lucky. Janine McGee, the director of Mecklenburg County Veteran Services, really said, "Hey, I'm willing to take up this charge with the mayor's challenge." Um, And so we are co-leads for this group, which kind of started with maybe 30 names and has grown to over 100 people in our community. It's a multidisciplinary team. We've got CMPD, various hospital administrative staff, the VA, a variety of veteran service organizations, to include many who are a part of NC Serves Metrolina, but people who are passionate about this issue.
I saw a bright flash, and it was instant regret. My name is Mccurdy. I served 5 years in the Army as artillery. I got out in 2012. When I got out, I was messed up, but I refused to admit it. I went and bought a new truck, and I was in a really low day, and I just don't remember a whole lot about it, but I drove about 60, 70 miles per hour into the end cap of a guardrail. June 28th, I went and shot myself. My personal life wasn't doing the greatest. Financially, I wasn't doing the greatest. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. And before I knew it, I was locked in my car. I texted a suicide note to my wife and my parents, just saying, "I'm sorry, I can't do it any longer." And they all flipped out. My wife ran outside, and I was locked in my car. She thought all the guns were already hidden from me, because I did say I was going to a week before, but she didn't know there was a gun in my truck. She was banging on the window. I put it in reverse, drive away, because I didn't want to do anything in front of them, and she stood behind my car, so I threw it in a park. She ran back up to my window, and I pulled the trigger. It was instant regret, and all I could see was the bright lights and everything, and I was scared. I've talked to another veteran that tried to commit suicide also, by shooting himself, and he said the same thing. It was instant regret. If I tell my story that prevents one veteran from committing suicide, it'd be worth it.
Michelle, thanks for joining us on this important show. You deal with transitioning veterans and military members. Talk about what you do exactly.
Well, it's my job entails bringing veterans that are either ill, injured, or just discharging from the military into the VA system. Those are typically the ones that need follow-on care because they were injured in some capacity and would need follow-on. So I am a liaison between those transitions from active duty into the VA and try to make sure that their paperwork and everything is done so they don't have to worry about that. They can worry more so about their health care. And that is the bulk of what I do.
One thing I hear when I talk with veterans is how some of them had very bad transitions. I don't want to say they all do, because there's a lot of them that have very good transitions, but why is that important to make sure that we make the transitions as smooth as possible in your mind?
Because when you think about transitioning, it's already a difficult part of your life when you're coming from doing something every day to now you're not sure how the rest of tomorrow or what tomorrow is going to bring. So that transition period is just a moment of clarity. It is my goal to make that as smooth as possible so that they not necessarily have to worry about the paperwork or the what do I do next part of that transition. They more so worry about their health care and making sure that they are taking care of themselves. You know, most veterans, when they are transitioning out, are so used to helping others that they sometimes forget to help themselves. Well, this is that period where they need to help themselves. So we work to make sure that they can worry about themselves now than worry about making sure that DD-214 is in the right place or things like that.
I know you're not a suicide prevention specialist. Right. That's not your job, but transitioning veterans, transition soldiers into veteran life, that's that biggest point of an issue where the suicide rate is the highest.
Right.
What is it you see as part of not only what you do with the VA, but you're also with the American Legion, so you see a lot of different roles here, but why is that transition period important to try to stop that suicide time period?
Well, there's several different ways. Eligibility criteria is one. and ensuring that those that are transitioning know about their eligibility rights, their benefits, and also other resources that they have to help them transition. There's so many different avenues to approach it that there's no wrong door, if you will. And one being, again, the eligibility into the VA. And if they didn't want to necessarily come to the VA yet, there's the vet centers that still is a partner that they still can get treatment, as well as other partners in the community that they can seek. And working at the American Legion, we understand some of those partners, so we try to connect them that way. We know that it is hard, but we let them know that there is a community out there for them, and there's others that have done the exact same thing they have. So the best way to encompass everything is to just inform them. We think the best informed veteran is the best veteran.
At the Legion, you're the commander in Cary. Yes. Currently. What is it you guys talk about when it comes to suicide? Is that part of your active talking that, amongst your veterans that are in the community that you're part of?
It is. Mental health is real when we understand that. And even though a lot of our members in the American Legion are not fresh out of the military, they understand the thinking of the military, and knowing that we have been in a conflict for a while, that transition may not be as simple as most think. So yes, we talk about suicide prevention. We work with different organizations, again, in a community to bring that knowledge forward for those veterans that are transitioning, to make it known so that they know, here's a partner that I can work with to get help or seek help if I was afraid because of the stigma to go here or there. We're truly trying to eliminate that stigma, because we understand that, again, mental health is real, and suicide prevention is that one-way trip. We want to make sure that we eliminate it.
I just kind of felt like my life was over. I didn't feel good. I just couldn't feel like I could take anything else. My life personally kind of collided with each other because of the things that I had went through in my childhood. I am a lesbian. That my mother kicked me out of the house. That's why I became homeless, and always having to struggle. I guess I've always been in kind of survival mode, so to speak. And everything just kind of fell on me and crashed down on me when I got out, because now I'm by myself. And you have to think about all the things that happened when you were there. I had PTSD really bad, and I really basically had a nervous breakdown is what I did. I did attempt suicide 3 times. I was so numb, I can't even really remember even doing it. I just woke up one day and said, I can't do this anymore. So if I'm not dying, then obviously I have to start living. Tell somebody, ask somebody, call a friend that knows what you're going through, say maybe a battle buddy or somebody you know that was in the service. Because I think it's important to ask somebody that understands what you're going through.
Now we're joined by Dr. Greg Inman from the Raleigh Vet Center. Thank you, Greg, for being here, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
We just saw the story from the young lady, female veteran. How big of an issue is suicide with female veterans right now?
Well, it's a growing problem. 17% of the military currently is female. So the number of veterans is increasing in terms of how many female veterans that we see. They encounter the same problems male veterans do, but at a higher rate they experience military sexual trauma. They encounter the same problems when they come home in terms of stressors, from needing to get a job, needing to transition from being in the military to civilian life, and it's a growing issue.
What are some of the things that are available, especially at the Vet Center, for people who are having mental health issues, PTSD, TBI, things like that, that are causing these issues that eventually do sometimes lead to suicide?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we do is we do outreach, and we find those veterans that are in need of services. We specialize in treating combat veterans, and we specialize in treating those who experience military sexual trauma. So once we're able to identify them and bring them in, we're able to help them. And I think that is one of the biggest issues that we encounter, is making sure that we get these people who are in need of services to come to the vet center and use the VA. 2/3 of those who commit suicide have never utilized VA services. So it's up to not just the vet center and the VAs to do outreach, but it's up to the community, veteran service organizations, and family and friends to identify those people who are in need of services and help them to access care.
I know we had a recent incident here where a coworker came to me and said there was a veteran that was within our church that was having some issues and they needed some help. How do you make sure that the community understands that they can refer these to you, especially if they're combat veterans?
Yeah, the first thing I think is to ask the questions. When you identify somebody who seems to be struggling, they seem depressed, or they may be experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, seeming helpless or hopeless, first is to ask the question, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? And then it's okay to ask that question, are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking about harming yourself? And if they are, getting them the help that they need.
To calm people's nerves, how do you make sure that when they come to you that they understand you're not taking anything away from them? They can get the help they need. It's a process, though.
Yeah, we work really closely with the veterans and families that we serve. We talk with them about everything that we're going to do. It's a collaborative effort. Very rarely do we feel the need to have somebody locked up, which is the concern that many veterans have. And we never lock anybody up without talking with them and coming up with a plan that is best for them. In those rare cases that somebody gets locked up, we work with them, we work with the doctors, and the goal is to keep them in the hospital as short a time as possible. And inevitably, they come back to me and say, thank you, I was in a really, really bad place, and I really needed that help and that level of attention.
And there's different types of options. It's not just individual treatment, there's also group treatments
Yeah,
available.
there's individual, there's family, there's couples counseling. Depending on what the needs of the veteran are, we're going to customize care that's going to be best for them.
Another aspect is when someone does commit suicide, you also have to deal with bereavement side of things too.
Yeah, that's another specialty at the vet center. We do bereavement counseling. We see family members of those that have both died while serving and those that have committed suicide. And we work with the family in dealing with the grief and the pain that comes with suicide.
For a situation like that, you know, how do they make sure they come to you? How do they find you on that?
A number of different avenues. We get a lot of referrals from the TAPS organization, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We get referrals from the military, from the National Guard, and word of mouth are the most common ways that they come to see us for bereavement counseling.
Just the important thing is make sure you ask for help.
Absolutely.
It appears that we've lost more post 9/11 veterans to suicide than we lost in Iraq due to combat. And I really believe those numbers are accurate, which would be north of 5,000. Very troubling for me. I really have to compartmentalize my reaction to it because, you know, the greatest country on earth, and I see this as an epidemic. This should be a national crisis. In the prep and the work that you've done for this interview for an hour, somewhere in America, a veteran's already taken their life. And there's a chance one of those was one of the North Carolina veterans. We have to get better at this. I deployed in 2013 to Afghanistan, and I was a sergeant major for what was called 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force Forward. 15,000 troops, a lot of U.S., other countries. And in that year that we were there, we had 4 suicides, 3 United States Marines and 1 U.S. Army soldier. And and a personal friend of mine who's still serving was one of the first responders to one of those suicides. And he's still serving, he's a sergeant major. And I could see that it shook him to the core, literally to the core. I could see the look in his eyes of just the lack of understanding of why this would take place and that what do we do through this struggle. A very close friend I went to Marine Corps boot camp with all the way back in September 1986. I rode on the airplane with him, same platoon at Parris Island. Served together on and off, served in Iraq together, not in the same command, but adjacent units. He was famous in the Marine Corps as a sergeant major. Well known, and in Paul's opinion, he could have been the sergeant major of the Marine Corps one day. He got out a few years old, he got out at 28 years, was a motivational speaker, would travel around the country, did a lot of things for youth groups, scouts, and veterans groups for free. And a lot of what his talks was about suicide, suicide prevention, and having a plan, having a team. His big theme was Spartans and looking back at the Spartans, you know, and how they really were a family. Yet, out of the blue, he lived in Pennsylvania. He went out a country road, middle of the night, sent a text to his family that says, "I love you," and he took his own life. We can bring to bear the mightiest, you know, best fighting force in the world. But one of the back end of that is the baggage. And the baggage is that this is still a human endeavor, that humans go through things that no one else goes through, that you don't want them to go through, but they have to go through it for the cost of our freedom, and that is that cost. And the suicide is not right. We have to be way ahead of this. We can be much better. It has to be much more hands-on and much more aggressive. The key is leadership that is personable and engaged is the key to a younger service member, or maybe even an older service member, to having a conversation to say, "I don't think I'm doing right. This isn't right." And explaining to our service members and giving them training on what right is, at least for them, what's close to right, and what right looks like or sounds like or feels right. That, you know, service members are trained to be tough and resilient. And what they're holding when this baggage comes to suicide, it's just like anything else. It's like having a bad knee or a twisted back or something else. You just suck it up and you press through the pain. And I don't want them to press through this pain if it comes to them even thinking about suicide. Suicide is not an option. It shouldn't be. If I've intervened or asked someone a question and they got angry at me, yelled at me, hate me, not going to talk to me for the rest of their life, I still think, or the leadership or a concerned friend or partner, they're still doing the right thing. It has to be this genuine concern for your fellow service member. It has to be.
Now, Laura, you're with the VA, with the suicide prevention as a coordinator. You actually handle most of the eastern part of the region for the Durham VA. Talk about what that role actually does now.
So my role as suicide prevention coordinator entails a lot of outreach to the community. It's a lot of training to community providers. VA is moving towards more of a public health model and pulling in more of the community to address suicide within the veteran population.
There's trainings for the community that you're talking about, you are part of. Now, why is that important to make sure people outside of the VA understands the suicide risks?
So part of suicide prevention is looking at where veterans go on a day-to-day basis. It's their employers, it's their family, making sure that they feel comfortable asking veterans if they're having thoughts of suicide. That's the best prevention, is to be able to catch veterans where they're at on a daily basis, whether that be at work or at home, and having people around them being comfortable with asking that question.
That is a big question. Are you feeling okay? Are you having thoughts of suicide? That's something that most people think, oh, I might make them think bad thoughts if they ask that question. That's not true at all, though.
Right. That tends to be the myth that's out there. It's certainly not true. A lot of people that are having suicidal thoughts, they want someone to ask them. They want someone to show that they care. And veterans especially, they want to know that someone cares about them, that they can be heard. They want to come forward and tell someone those thoughts that they're having. And it's not always easy to initiate that on your own. So if you have someone asking you, are you having thoughts about suicide, that opens up conversation. And that's really what we want, is to have a conversation with that veteran to figure out how to keep them safe.
Biggest question next always is, okay, now my friend just told me he's having thoughts of suicide. Now what do I do?
So we have the Veterans Crisis Line. Veterans can always press 1, and I encourage friends and family to help veterans call that number. If you ask Siri to call it, she'll actually call it for you, which is a really nice feature. So you don't even have to remember the number. But calling Veterans Crisis Line and having a loved one sitting with that veteran, or a friend sitting with that veteran and calling to show their support, I think is really great of that friend or family member to do that.
I think people in certain parts of the state don't think of North Carolina as being an issue for suicide, especially when it comes to veterans. It is a major issue. There's 5 per week, roughly, killing themselves in this state right now by suicide. in Morehead City, there is actually projects going on as well, part of your eastern region you're covering. Talk about how that's looking at trying to do research and trying to figure out how to prevent suicide there.
Yeah, so that program is Together with Veterans. It's a program out of our MyRec department in Rocky Mountain, Colorado. They've contracted with an agency called Witchy, and they come out on a monthly basis. We meet with community providers that provide mental health services, with veteran agencies, with police, and we have a discussion about the gaps in services. That Carteret County community is just really impressive with the amount of passion that they have in looking at veterans' needs and how we can fill those gaps and what we need to do to get there.
Thank you for being part of this conversation on preventing military and veteran suicide. Remember, if you're feeling suicidal, reach out, call a battle buddy, call a friend, just ask for help. We're all part of the solution. Thanks for joining us on SITREP, A Reason to Live.